Hi there, welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. I'm your coach, Misha McKittrick. This is a podcast where we believe that as you take time for a mindset check, you have more power than you think you do. And we also believe that when we live our life being mentally awake, we have a greater capability, a greater capacity to live a truly amazing life. How are you? I am still on such a high from last week when the listeners, you guys joined me. If you missed it, I'm sorry you missed it, but make sure you listen to it. It was just awesome. It was so fantastic. Thank you again for joining me in that. You know, something that happened this last week that was such a win, so awesome for me. I got a message on Facebook from a person that I know in my life. Her name is Shira, and she messaged me and just said the very best things like, just found your podcast and I'm binging. And I texted it to my sister and my daughters and my nieces, and we're all texting about it. I just wanted you to know, and thank you so much. And she shared some things with me that just really warmed my heart and just made me feel like, dang, it is such a pleasure to be doing this and to be holding this space with you. So thank you everyone for being awesome listeners and for showing up, and we're having a great time over in the Facebook Mindset Check group. So feel free to bounce over there and to check into that side of this conversation as well. If you're new here, in the first season of the Mindset Check podcast, what we're doing is we're reading through my journal that I had when I was 15 and pregnant. And as I tackled a few tough years of being pregnant and losing my little girl, and in an interesting way, as we take each entry and break it down, it somehow also applies to just life in general and the path, that we are all forging and moving through and working through. So in a really cool way, it just helps me show up raw and vulnerable. And somehow the most amazing things come of it. Honestly, I know how, because I'm definitely receiving inspiration and loving that. So if you're new here, you're welcome to just start listening where you're at, or you can go back to episode 1 and listen to it chronologically, however you want to come into this space. We're glad to have you. In this episode, there's a few things happening. I talk about most of the people that I talk about, I think you know, and then I mention a few friends' names that isn't really important that you know. We also talk about JC. We talked about her last week, or maybe the week before, but you will know if you've been following, who she is, and if not, it's probably pretty self-explanatory as well. So let's jump in. December 15th, 1994. Last Saturday, I went with Jesse's mom to St. George, and we had a good time. Sunday, we went to Salt Lake and shopped. I think I'm talking about we as in me and my sister, Shelly. I wasn't there with Jesse's mom. So Sunday we went to Salt Lake and shopped and stayed at my uncle's. Tried to get a hold of Jesse before we left. Remember, these are the days of no cell phones. He showed up at my uncle's and we talked. I've told him that me and my dad, had talked to a lawyer and that we were getting a divorce, which I had already told him, and it slapped him in the face. He said he was sorry for everything he'd done and admitted everything except for sleeping with another. He started bawling and couldn't handle it. We talked and cried until 2:30, and we went to the door, and he started kicking the bushes as he left and couldn't leave. He knocked again on the door and told me it was killing him. I agreed to counseling, and he left. The next day, Monday, we went to Ogden to deliver Discovery toys. at my school. I saw Jane and Angela, Millie, but no Callie. Jesse ran most of our errands with us and then wanted to drive me to Salt Lake, and he acted so different and nice. I couldn't believe it. Maybe it's for the better, or maybe it's just an act. I don't know. I found out JC's number, Panaka Girl, and I'm calling her tomorrow. Jesse said they only kissed. I'm going to ask her. Taylor's top teeth are almost in, and she's thrown up 5 times in the last 7 hours. I think she has the flu. I started school last Tuesday, and I hate it. December 16th, 1994. I called JC and she said they only kissed, and he brought it on and was begging her to have sex. Anyway, Jesse got a new Pathfinder, a car, and traded his Mazda in for it. We talked all night from 2:30 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. Taylor was sick, throwing up, and diarrhea all night anyway. She has a doctor's appointment tomorrow at 10 a.m. It's so sad to see her like this and not be able to do anything about it. If Jesse and I do get back together, I think I deserve a temple marriage, but Jesse doesn't want to give up his lifestyle. I need my patriarchal blessing. Taylor's top left tooth is through. Ooh. Ooh wee mama. This is... I guess I'm the most appalled that I went from saying, I called Jenny and they only kissed, he brought it on and was begging her for sex anyway. Like, hello? I probably... Oh my gosh, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. Because, right, this Jenny situation was the one that my sister knew about, and then he threatened her about, and the whole thing. And, there's an element of waking up here, right? Where he is starting to tune into, like, the consequences of his choice. We'll dive into that a little bit today. All of the memories and my view of going back to visit some of my friends at a school that I loved, but also seeing a lifestyle that I didn't want to live. That was a really powerful thing for me to see the difference, for me to be living at my parents' and then to visit and to go back into the space. That was a very interesting thing that I was able to see, just little bit by little bit. I'm super proud of myself that I got that girl's phone number and called her. Who knows? He could have called her and told her what to say. Who knows? I don't know, because she obviously, told me things like he brought it on and he was begging for, just... So maybe not. I don't know. But I do remember the school situation, and going to the school where my parents lived was very different than the school that I had been in at Ogden. It was very much like you go in and you study everything on your own and you take tests on your own, and it's basically just a place to study. It's just like a library where, in Ogden, I had all of this interaction, and there was some interaction at this like adult high school that I had been enrolled in, that I transferred to. But it was just, it paled in comparison to what I had in Ogden with friends and teachers and just kind of that interaction and still sitting in classes and that kind of thing. Oh, and then just being that mama, and seeing this girl who was such a bright light, just loving this girl she was so at a point where she was, starting to take the steps in between couches and starting to just roll balls back and forth with you and to say words and to respond. And, the falling asleep in her high chair with her cute little high tops on that I've talked about in other episodes, and just so much richness from this little point in time when I moved home, and being able to really focus on her, because Jesse stayed up north. I left and he stayed up there. And so he's, 3-4 hours away from us, which was good. It was like this time where I could just be with her, and being with her and being in a very safe space and in a very, a space at my parents' house that we were able to cultivate relationships. We were able to focus on good things. It wasn't so much bad like in our face all the time. I probably wasn't so worried about money and food. I didn't write anything about that, but I know that there was that feeling of safety that when I moved back, just that feeling of comfort, that feeling where things are being taken care of. And so more can grow and more goodness can come from it, versus that empty feeling of kind of being scrappy and trying to, kind of make it through life, and kind of that on your own, but there's still people around you, but kind of that on your own type feeling. There was a huge contrast for me moving home and just being surrounded with the support, not just knowing that I had it, moving home, feeling it. That was amazing. And then I think it's interesting that I talk about a temple marriage. A temple marriage in our religion is, you have to be living your life a certain way to be able to enter the temple, and you receive you make a different type of promise or covenant when you get married in the temple. And then I also referenced a patriarchal blessing, which in our religion is like direction from God. And it is written out for you after you receive it on a paper, and you keep it throughout your life. And I knew about it. Like, I knew in my mind that now I was like seeking for that or reaching for that. There's a quote from Marianne Williamson that says, "A certain amount of desperation is usually necessary before we're ready for God." I think that's a very wise quote. I remember thinking about, religion or church when we lived in Ogden. And I remember actually feeling like, wonder why they're not like reaching out for me. Interesting, right? Like, our mindset can be such that we turn our living and the way that we live over to other people. It's in someone else's control. It's not in my control. And I love that Marianne Williamson says it like that, because we really do have to open up a space before we're ready for that. But I knew, and you can tell that I felt I was at my parents' house, and my contrast between my marriage and their marriage, and the feeling that was in a home, and it was just such a contrast. And so I was in my mind starting to reach for that, just in my heart and in my mind, So what I really want to dive into, really what I want to focus on today, is this sort of waking up that Jesse is doing, right? When I say it like slapped him in the face, he's just barely kind of coming to and being aware, like, hey, filing for divorce. Like, this is over, right? I'm filing for divorce. And it's interesting because it's like he's just seeing it. He's just seeing wow. So this is how this is going. And I think he wasn't realizing what was happening. Now he is. And now he's really feeling it and very emotional and wanting to probably still have the best of both worlds, right? I don't know. I can only say that because I know how the future plays out. But in this moment, he's admitting things. He's admitting to things, not everything, P.S. He's admitting things, and it feels like he's, kind of coming clean, and that he's really wanting this and suddenly aware. And he was relentless at getting what he wanted. It's interesting how I went up there. My dad and I had already talked to a lawyer. And then I'm like, yeah, I agreed to counseling. But things are a process. Things are a process. Anything is a process when you go through, especially major life changes. They're just a process. But I want to talk about being mentally awake today. I want to talk about how we can move through life and not completely realize or see what's right in front of us. If any of you have done scouts, I was a Boy Scout mom for a lot of years. I have that under my belt. I was a Girl Scout as a young girl. I mean, I sold the heck out of those Girl Scout cookies. And we pledged as part of both of those pledges that we would say at every meeting that we're pledging to be mentally awake. And I don't really ever think I thought about that. About being mentally awake and about what it takes to be mentally awake. Because when we lie to ourselves, and when you tell so many lies like Jesse had, you lose your grasp on what's real, on what reality is. And, Jesse was really in the throes of trying to figure out what was real, what wasn't real, because there were so many lies. And then there was also this grasp on reality, like, hey, if you do A, then the consequence is B. If you don't show up for your wife and you treat her like this and you run out on her and all these things, you're going to lose her. The grasp on reality. And so I think it's really important to stop and to ask ourselves the questions. What are the things that put us to sleep? Obviously lying, not wanting to see. And then you can see my side of the story where I didn't want to see. There was a ton of red flags and I didn't want to see. I love the quote that says, "There are none so blind as those who will not see." And there are so many people, authors, that actually claim that quote, rooting all the way back to the Bible. But then, anyway, I tried to trace it, and it just is many authors. There are none so blind as those who will not see. And if you look at the origin of the word blind, it's not just to be enveloped in darkness. It's also to be lacking mental perception, to make cloudy or to deceive, to not necessarily be sightless, but rather be confused. So many times people are blind to reality and only see what they want to see, because that's what makes them comfortable. And so what are the ways that we can step back from it all and see it? What are the ways that actually allow our life to be better because we can see it, because we have the courage and the bravery to see it? We can change things when we see it. It doesn't mean that we have to be scared of it. Seeing something for what it is allows you to have more control in the situation. And it really takes stepping outside of the situation, kind of like we do with the mini stories every week, where we look at our life through these stories, or you're looking at your life through the story I'm reading you from my journal. And as you do that, you see more about your life. So there's the story of the elephant, and you're probably familiar with it because it's a very popular story where a group of blind men hear that there's a strange animal that was called an elephant that had been brought to town. And none of them were aware of the shape or the form of the elephant. And out of curiosity, they are saying okay, well, we got to go inspect this and know it by touching it, of what we are capable. We might be blind, but we can touch it. And so they sought it out, and when they found the elephant, they groped around about it. And the first person whose hand landed on the trunk said, "This being is like a thick snake." And another one who reached its ear said, "It seemed kind of like a fan." And another person whose hand was on its leg said, "The elephant's a pillar-like tree trunk." And the blind man who placed its hand upon its side said, "The elephant is like a wall. This thing is so strong." And another felt its tail and described it as a rope. And the last felt its tusk, stating that the elephant, which is hard and smooth, like a spear. And there's different versions of how this parable ends. They stop talking. Some versions they fight. They argue a lot about it. Some of them, they come together and collaborate and talk about to truly see the elephant in full view. Like they say, "This is what I saw, this is what I saw." Then they can put the picture of the elephant together. There's another one where a sighted man enters the parable and then says, no, listen guys, stop fighting. You got it all wrong. Let me tell you about the whole picture. The whole elephant looks like this. In other words, you all felt the correct thing, but you didn't see the entire picture. And so sometimes our life is like that. We might not see the totality of the truth. Socrates said, "An unexamined life is not worth living." Because if we sit down and we examine our life and we see the areas where we need to confront, we need to have bravery, we might need to have some conversations that require a big fat deep breath. But those are the things that help us just take a step back and see the bigger picture of what is going on. And so many things can get in the way of our ability to do that, right? Maybe we don't want to accept reality because our made-up fairy tale version is better for as long as it will last, right? I wanted to believe that none of the red flags that I was seeing could be possible. And sometimes other things that get in the way of it is our desire to be right. It's really uncomfortable to sort of be called out on something that you're doing that might be hurtful to someone, or just little actions. I can remember taking a course for women about marriage that I just absolutely adored. It's called Taming Jane. And we were given a sheet of how women emasculate men. And our first assignment was to look at this list and to figure out what we needed to stop doing. So sometimes it's uncomfortable to look at things like that. And a lot of us want to be right. I have a bad reputation for that. But because I've learned the benefits of trying to step out of that, I'm able to embrace the truth of I really am not right all the time, and it's actually better because that is what allows you to step back and see the whole elephant. Something that's kind of interesting that I think you might find, I don't know, I liked learning with being right, is that we can become so addicted to it, and it's a neurochemical process in our brain. When people argue and win, our brain floods with different hormones. Adrenaline, dopamine, those things make you feel good, dominant, even invincible. It's a feeling that anyone would want to replicate and can make you feel like you're kind of on top of the world. And so then the next time that we're in a tense situation and we fight again, and we become very good at becoming right because it feels so dang good. And so I think that there was relief in learning that, because we can learn that our brain will also trick us in these forming of bad habits because it releases these chemicals that feel good. And I think it's very pivotal to learn that there's also another hormone that can feel just as good as adrenaline. Oxytocin is activated by human connection, and it opens up the networks in our brain and helps us to further trust and open ourselves into sharing. So when we experience safe and amazing relationships, we also have incredible hormones that are released, and we get to avoid these spikes of cortisol and adrenaline, and we get to have a more even kill feeling and sort of that feel good of the oxytocin. And so I want to bring that to your attention because it's really important to understand what you get when you give up being right, because it's easier to give up being right when you can also break down the benefits of being right. Because remember, it's not really about that tiny little argument in that moment. It's about our ability to see ourselves, the whole picture, to step back. It's about someone being able to approach us instead of being afraid and creating situations in our life where, people can't talk to us. And it's very difficult for us to learn anything as long as we're really busy defending ourselves. Wayne Dyer said, "When given the choice between being right and being kind, choose kind." Sometimes we have to practice letting go of being right. Because we think that letting go of being right means that the other person is right. Or we get defensive because we have to prove our point, or whatever it is that's in the way. And in that circumstance, we also have to understand and realize that what other people think is not necessarily true about us. And we get to be in a space where we hear people and where we create different hormones to release inside of our brain. And we get to create a situation where we will hear, where people know that we're the kind of person who will show up and hear what they have to say to us. And it doesn't mean that it's true about us, but it's true for them. And so we need to hear it. I love the example of the guy who goes to Starbucks and he asks for a discount when he's in the line. And he knows he's not going to get it. But he always asks, hey, can I get 20% off that? And they're always like, no. And he does that so that he can practice hearing no. So that it becomes an okay thing inside of his body, the way his body responds. And sometimes we need to practice being able to see what isn't going well, what we aren't doing right. For a while, I was a member of a group called Toastmasters, and we were doing public speaking. And when we gave each other feedback, we would give it in sandwich form. So we would give one positive thing that they did, and then one thing that they could correct, and then one positive thing that they did. And in that format, it was much more deliverable and, palpable for the person receiving it. And then also, we can't really grow unless we're getting that feedback. So in the program, we really are not able to become a better speaker if we're not able to hear the feedback that someone else is giving us. And if we can take that into our life, you can make requests in your family. Hey, let's try the sandwich method. If you have something to tell me, maybe tell me 2 good things. But let's practice getting better, not proving that we are the best or needing to defend ourselves. Because sometimes the truth dang well hurts, And sometimes the truth hurts so bad because we're not willing to change the truth. Like we don't like the version of the truth. And so we really don't want to change it. And so it feels yucky to have it shown in our face. People who are afraid of what other people say or think about them are actually afraid of having the values of their own life flashed back at them in their face, right? It feels like a very negative thing. They don't want to see the truth. Maybe they're not willing to move out of it. And I'm saying that if we sign up to be willing to be our best selves, then seeing those things would be helpful. And it invites and creates a loving space where we can improve, where we can get better. And I think there's just a note here on just allowing ourselves to just be our authentic self. I think that we think that we have to give the world our best rendition of us, but then that would be the fake us. And who you are, who you really are, is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I love the poem, The Man in the Glass. It starts, when you get what you want in your struggle for self and the world makes you king for a day, then go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that guy has to say. For it isn't your father, mother, or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The feller whose verdict counts most in your life is the guy staring back from the glass. He's the feller to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you, clear up to the end, and you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test, if the guy in the glass is your friend. You may be like Jack Horner and chisel a plum and think you're a wonderful guy, but the man in the glass says you're only a bum if you can't look him straight in the eye. You can fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass. but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. So stare in the mirror. This part is key. Tell yourself truly, what do you see? What do you see? And no matter what that is, remind yourself that you get to create that. And so if you see something currently that you don't like, that's okay. That's okay. You get to create who you want to be. You get to take your sandwich feedback, right? After you see the elephant, after you see the whole elephant, and you can take your sandwich feedback. You get to decide who you want to be. And again, going back to the sandwich feedback, some of the feedback is stuff that I don't want to be. You know, maybe they say to do this or to do that while you're speaking, and it's something that I don't think connects me well with the audience, and I don't have to sign up for that. But I can sit and honor that person's opinion. So I think it's really important as we pledge ourselves to be mentally awake that we see, that we are willing to open up our eyes and see. And that if the truth hurts a little bit, that we understand we have the capability within us to do something about it. And with that, I hope you see that you have so much power to create your life, especially when you're truly willing to see your life. Because our stories help others, I'm always asking you to share yours with us. One of our listeners named Allison shared this part of her story with us. She said, "I've loved every episode of this podcast, but my favorite so far is the power of a mentor. This episode was seriously so inspiring. What these women and teachers did for those young moms brought me to tears. They gave them hope and solid advice at a tender time on their journeys. They allowed them to experience joy even during hard times and to see a bright future ahead, even though they may have only been able to see darkness at that time. It made me realize the impact that those kinds of people have had in my own life, and it makes me want to give even more to others, especially during those formative years. Even though Misha's podcast is about specific journal entries and events that formed her, it's amazing how well it translates into other areas of life, especially from the parenting side of things. I'm so grateful to get to know a piece of her amazing dad and sweet little girl, and that they live on through the stories she's willing to share with all of us. I believe they are very much aware of and so proud of the important work she is doing to help others through their sticky times. Allison, honestly, that brings me to tears. And I'm so grateful for your support in this journey of telling this story. Thank you so much for sharing something, a piece of how this podcast has touched your life. If you have any insights, breakthroughs, or anything that's helped you move through your day because of the things that we talk about on this podcast, we would love it if you would share. Send your thoughts in an email to hello@myfriendmisha.com, or you can DM me on Instagram at myfriendmisha. That's MESHA. And I'll take a minute on our upcoming podcasts to share your story with our other listeners. Another thing that we're doing right now is we're dropping into the Facebook group. We have a private Facebook group called Mindset Check. You can really only join the group if you ask to join and if you pledge to be kind to others in the group. And we're dropping in there and going one-on-one live with me and sharing. So you can share anything that you've got from the podcast, or if there's something that you would love help working through, we can do that too. Remember that as we share freely from our own hearts, it allows others to do the same. And if this podcast really has helped you, we would love it if you will share it. That would mean so much. Don't forget to subscribe and review. And hey, thank you so much for letting me walk through a small part of your journey with you today. Remember that you have the power to create a life that feels good on the inside, not only one that just looks good on the outside. Until next time, my friends.